Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do these without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to take a moment to say thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to thank our great platinum sponsors, including Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Gipper, sports graphics made incredibly simple. Camp Mobile, where leaders communicate better. Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. And Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Thanks to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is Emily Barkley. Emily is a certified Master Athletic Administrator. She's the Director of Athletics at Union Public Schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She's also the President of the State Association, the OIAAA, and I know she's very active on the national level as well. Emily, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, to our listeners, we're recording this on February 22nd, and Emily and her schools are in the midst of a blizzard, ice storm, apocalyptic school closing. So we appreciate her spending some time with us, and maybe she can comment a little bit as we get into the chat. But Emily, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and maybe how a love of sports led to this position in athletic administration.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the athletic director at Union High School, like you mentioned, and that's ironically enough where I went to high school, kindergarten through 12th grade. So wow. I don't know a whole lot besides Union High School. I played basketball and soccer growing up, club soccer, school soccer and school basketball. Basketball was my passion, and I think I might've been a little bit better in soccer. So just combined the love of both of those sports and kind of took me throughout. I didn't venture very far. I went to the University of Tulsa here in Tulsa, and they had a sports administration program that was just starting up. And I knew that was going to be, it was a passion of mine in high school because of the relationships I had on my teams and the coaches that I had. And so I knew this was something I wanted to get back into. And because they had that athletic administration program, it really drew me to going over there. Had an opportunity to play small college basketball. But when I met with somebody at TU in that department, she just said, there's going to be a great need for females. This was in 1996. And around Oklahoma, it was kind of the height, I like to call it the height of Title IX. There were a lot of litigations. There were a lot of focus on high schools around here and what they were doing to provide equity amongst male and female sports. And so it was something that I kind of took those words to heart. And I knew that's what I had wanted to do whenever I was in high school. I joked with our athletic director at the time that I wanted to come take his job someday. And he said, you can have it. And now sitting in these shoes, I know exactly what he meant. Must have been a rough day that I mentioned that. But no, I had a great opportunity to go to the University of Tulsa and went undergraduate in the first group to come through their athletic administration program, and then stayed and got my master's there as a graduate assistant for the football program.
Well, I know that back in your high school days, you had some pretty good teams there at Union. What's a special memory from your competitive days?
Well, again, basketball was kind of my passion. We were able to make it to the state semifinals twice, ranked number 2 in the state, and just kind of fell short in that semifinal game. But in soccer, surprisingly enough, we took a team my senior year that hadn't ever been there and made it to the state championship game. So while we fell short in the championship game, getting to experience that as an athlete was a lot of fun for both sports.
Yeah, those are great memories. And you and I were talking earlier in Florida. Soccer is a winter sport, certainly because of the weather, like basketball. And so I just wonder how many great soccer, basketball athletes we're missing out on, because they can only play one or the other.
Oh yeah, we do have quite a few that come through here. I think they complement each other really well, in terms of, I think playing soccer brought my toughness onto the basketball court. It kind of taught me that. And then obviously, taking a break from the sport, it gets you in a way different shape, but getting a break during the year from one versus the other, I think really helped keep me rejuvenized whenever the next one came around. But I think we've got, we have three players, All-Americans that play for the University of Arkansas right now, play soccer there. They all three went together from our high school, and all three of them at some point played basketball here. One of them's a little sister who has committed to Arkansas. Same thing. She's a tremendous basketball and soccer standout. So I think they could go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're preaching to the choir about multi-sports benefits there. Take us through that period from after you graduated from University of Tulsa to those first jobs, and I'm going to assume it was teaching and coaching, and how that led into your current position as AD.
Well, surprisingly enough, I never had a desire to be a teacher. Believe it or not, I'm terrified of speaking in front of large groups of people, and I never thought that being in front of a classroom sounded, it just wasn't in my forte. So I actually had a desire to go into administration. Now, the opportunities normally wouldn't be there. I mean, I'm sure when you get asked by young AD or young people who want to become athletic directors, how's the best path to get there? I mean, most of the time it's you go into coaching and you show your desire through that way. But I was able, while I was at the University of Tulsa, to volunteer back at my high school and help coach some teams. I helped coach a soccer and some basketball teams throughout that 6 years at TU, and built those relationships. And fortunately for me, our athletic director at the time when I graduated with my master's he was the football coach that had been here whenever I was a student. And he had just seen my work ethic and being closely tied to TU and being around. So they actually had a position that was created. It was the spirit coordinator at the time, and had me in charge of cheer, pom, and dance, which is nothing that I had ever known. So at age 24, I came in somewhat of an administrative role over those three groups. And he said, this is going to grow into something, whatever you make of it. And so I just kind of took that opportunity of leadership. And not going to lie, those first, challenging, there's some passionate parents in that group. And I think that actually helped me today because I grew some pretty thick skin in those first few years. But right out of college, I worked for a restaurant company that my dad had owned. I don't know if you guys are familiar out there with Mazzio's Pizzas, but he had owned one while I was in high school. And so I had a chance to work for the company, the corporate office that's headquarters here, for about 9 months. And they just said, I know this isn't your passion, so as soon as something opens up and you need to take that job. And luckily for me, it was 9 months later and I landed here at Union, and I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's so cool that that opportunity was created for you. That's kind of an old school approach, but good for you. Emily, in our profession, we always talk about the importance of leadership and mentoring, and I'm going to bet you had a couple of mentors along the way. The expression I like to use is I still hear the voices of my mentors in my head when I'm talking to a kid or a coach or maybe a parent. So whose voice do you still hear?
Yeah, absolutely. My high school basketball coach, Edie Allen, was a huge mentor for me. She allowed me the opportunity to come back and kind of learn from her and grow from her. And she grew up a coach's kid. And so she, just had a lot of those experiences. And having a strong female role model for me was important. And at the University of Tulsa, Judy McLeod was the athletic director at the time. So actually had the opportunity, maybe not on the day-to-day, but to see what she did in her role, was kind of a mentor. And she probably wouldn't know it, but just getting to observe and work beside her as a graduate assistant. And she's now the commissioner of the Conference USA. So it was a pretty cool deal to be able to kind of follow just what she did as a female in that role, as well as my old high school coach.
Oh, absolutely. And I always enjoy hearing these stories. It's just a great reminder that, whoever we are, we didn't get there by ourselves. There were people
Right.
there that were pushing and helping us. Um, One of the things we like to do with this podcast, one of the things we try to do is to share some best practices. And, I've gotten to know you a little bit, this last year, through, the virtual conference and things like that. And, I've read your bio. You're certainly an accomplished and decorated athletic administrator. So what are a couple of things at your schools that you can look at with equal parts pride and humility and say, we do this better than anybody else. We really do a great job. What are a couple of best practices you can share?
Okay. Well, I think, it may seem a little obvious, but I think we hire extremely good people here at Union. A lot of them, or I would say several of them, were here before I came. And so just getting to work with these great people. But I mean, as you well know, if you have a program led by a great person, a great communicator, um, somebody that is very organized in there, it makes your job a whole lot easier and it makes you look good as a leader. And I think we've been able to do that a lot here. By virtue, we're the second largest school in the state of Oklahoma. We're right here in the center of Tulsa. We're very visible. But I think once we get people here, we treat them well, and we try to give them the resources it takes to be successful. And so we're able to retain good head coaches, good assistant coaches, good junior high coaches that have been here for a really long time. And so I know that seems, like it would be quite obvious, but it's not always easy to do. And so once you get those people and you treat them well and you make it a family, which I think we try to do here, I think that's where our success comes in.
Yeah, I agree 100% with the philosophy. I disagree maybe that it's sometimes obvious. I'm going to guess that many of your varsity head coaches, and I'm going to guess you have a high percentage of coaches that also teach or work in the building. Is that correct?
That is, we do. Ours, they teach throughout the day, and we that's important to us too, because we want them to be good representatives of us in the building, and for their peers as coaches. So they teach 4 out of the 6 hours. One of them's an athletic hour, and then they have a plan. And so because of that, sometimes their peers that are teaching 5 hours can maybe think, well, that's not really fair. Why are they getting to leave? But if they come in and do a good job and do what they're supposed to do, volunteer, sit at the front as teachers, do all the things that we ask our student athletes to do. Then they help us create that relationship within the school. A lot of our principals are former coaches. A lot of our upper administration are former coaches, because they've proven themselves to be good leaders and putting themselves in that position. So we try to continue that relationship with them, by making sure our people are doing what they should be when they're teaching and when they're coaching, and representing our school.
No, you hit it on the head right there, is that they've proven themselves, of leaders of, whether it's young people or leaders of teachers, and now they're in a principal role. It's so, for you and I, it's so obvious that, guys, if we have a good teacher, they're probably, good at something else. And maybe it's advising the chess club, or maybe it's coaching the varsity softball team. But yeah, absolutely. Having teacher coaches in the building. We're very fortunate at my school. We're a smaller private school, but almost every single one of our head coaches teaches or works on campus. We've got a couple of great, walk-on coaches. Our boys soccer coach has been there for, 35 years, runs a huge soccer club in the area, but he's an educator and he gets it. He understands what educational athletics is all about. So, yeah, if principals, if you're listening, you want your athletic teams to be successful, hire good teacher coaches. Okay.
Yes.
Um, Emily, let's talk a little bit about, your journey with the state association and the NIAAA. We have some, young ADs that listen, I know, because they send me emails and ask me questions. But sometimes I don't think it's obvious for them the steps that are involved to, having a CMAA or, getting a state or a national award. So talk a little bit about that. How'd you get involved with OIAAA? And then talk a little bit about your certification path.
Sure. So when I was the assistant athletic director, I've been the athletic director for 9 years, 9 of my 17 that I've been here at Union. And right previous to becoming the athletic director, our athletic director at the time started, researching the RAA, the CAA, CMAA, and kind of got excited about it. And I've always been one that if the bachelor's is the expectation, then you go get your master's. If the master's, just do that one step further, try to be one step ahead. And so we kind of went on that journey to getting the certification. And, by then it became, okay, let's go to conferences and see how many classes we can take and how we can advance our education and kind of being that lifelong learner of the best practices, what's new, what are other ADs doing? Because my gosh, we're not in it alone. I know that everybody has probably been through it. While I think every single situation becomes unique, but there's a lot of athletic directors who have done something similar or been in a similar situation. So just really got passionate about that. And we had a couple of athletic directors in the state that really pushed the education piece on it. And so a bunch of us jumped on board and really glad that we did. And that's how it became the CMAA. But when our athletic director at the time, he was trying to find a service position on the board, and the state secretary treasurer position had opened up. And I told him, I said, I'll do that. I'll jump in, and I think a lot of times nobody wants to be that secretary, the treasurer, to handle the money. And I kind of enjoyed that. And so I volunteered for that position and really stayed with that probably for 10 to 12 years. I'm married to a small college basketball coach. I have a 4-year-old daughter. We lost one of our staff positions, one of our athletic director positions in our office. And so my time constraints started getting a little bit tighter, and I just felt like I needed to give up one of my roles so I could do a better service to my school here. And so I had looked to finding somebody to replace me as the secretary and treasurer of our state organization after doing that for, like I said, 10 to 12 years. And the opportunity to become the president, kind of a president-elect, opened up. And I thought, I haven't done that. I can do this. It's really a 3-year commitment of president-elect, president, and past president here in Oklahoma. And if at that time, when I finish that, if I feel like that service, that I've done what I could to help our state, then at that point I could walk away. Now being halfway into the presidency and learning so much. I mean, I've just learned so much about the national organization. I'm serving on the DEI committee, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Ad Hoc Committee. And now I think I sparked another passion inside myself to, once this 3-year journey is over, I have a feeling that I'll be trying to tackle some of those national committees and staying involved on the national level, because the people you meet, the things you learn, and just kind of giving back. Now it's weird to say, I feel like maybe I'm on the second half of my journey as an athletic director. Once you hit that, when you look at retirement, you're at the top of the mountain. Now we're starting to go down. Now I feel like I have this obligation to give back to all the people who were me 17 years ago, and try to get them passionate about it. And so that's kind of how my journey to becoming the president and involvement on the national and the Oklahoma level.
No, and I'm really glad you shared those different steps of, first taking the LTI courses, exploring the different levels of certification. And now, as you mentioned, you're on the new ad hoc committee, which, as you and I know, it's going to be a full committee here soon. It's just great. And for any of our ADs that are listening, take that step, get involved, volunteer, try to get involved at the state level, and those national opportunities are going to open up for you. So good stuff. Let's go and dive into our COVID section of the podcast. We're coming up on 1 year of having to deal with COVID. As I said, we're recording this in February. And we've seen a variety of responses across the country and also within individual states. So for our listeners, tell us what's happening right now in Oklahoma and in Tulsa as far as return to play and also return to school academics. What's going on?
Sure. Like most of the world, we shut down almost a year ago, is a little bit after. And our girls basketball team was on a bus headed to the state tournament, and our boys were not far behind them. And they kind of had to turn around and come back. And at that time, I don't think it hit what the enormity of the whole situation would be, because I think we all thought, well, it would be postponed a week or 2 weeks. And as those 2 weeks became 2 months and so forth, I think that when we got the green light in Oklahoma in June to start summer activities back, we did so. We were excited, but we did so with a lot of caution, because at that time we didn't know how it could spread, how athletically, when you put yourself in those situations, weightlifting, strength and conditioning, all of those, what that would do. But we pressed on along with the rest of Oklahoma because we were allowed to. And surprisingly enough, in August, started all of our fall sports. We did so, with precautions. 25% capacity, masks were required in Tulsa County, which we would have required that at our school anyway. So we still have that for spectators. And we set up our venues to try to make, I feel like our goal as administrators is to try to make our participants, our officials, and our workers as safe as possible. We can't control necessarily the person who's sitting up in the corner of the stands or that won't comply. And so we've really strongly encouraged, the mask and the social distancing. But my priority during the game, my focus is going to be how to keep those participants, officials, and workers as safe as possible. And then if a parent wants to go up there and, sit amongst each other, I'm not going to go up there and change that. And it's worked okay for us. We're fortunate. Like I said, we're the second largest school in Oklahoma. We have some venues. Our basketball arena at 25% can still fit 1,400 people in here. Our football stadium, ironically enough, was going through a renovation. So we were only at 50% capacity to begin with. So we ran 25% of 50% capacity. So not very many at our football stadium, but we made it successfully through the fall season. We are about 2 weeks out from making it successfully through the winter season with a few interruptions here and there. And then our spring seasons are set to begin. And, I think there's a little bit of a sigh of relief heading into spring because most of it's outdoors for us here in Oklahoma. The weather starts getting a little bit better and we feel like we can control the spacing, the airflow a little bit better. So like we talked about earlier, it's almost business as usual here. As usual as it can be when you're wearing masks and you're, having seating charts on the bus for your student athletes when they're going to places, just in case you have to contact trace them. But academically, we've been off and on. There was the choice for students to either be in person or distant learning, and those who chose in person have virtually been able to stay in school. I think we missed maybe 18 days total so far in person. Now, the snow and the ice is a completely different story because we would have been in person. We weren't in the shutdown mode, but we have been shut down for a few days for that. But it's exciting because as cautious as I want to be, I want to make sure everybody stays healthy. I want to make sure the grandparents that are home, that these student athletes are going home to, are continuing to stay healthy. But it's exciting to see kids compete. And I'm sure you know how that is, and the mental side of it for them when they get out there and try to be as normal as possible. That part's been rewarding to see. I don't want anybody to get ill, to put themselves in a bad situation, but knowing that we have been able to, and seeing the kind of the looks on their faces, that's been, rewarding from our end.
No, absolutely. Getting the kids out there and seeing the teams compete, that's what it's all about. You touched on it just a little bit, so I'm curious. Overall, looking back on it, you said you're just about wrapped up with winter. How has the fan support of protocols been? Have they, 90% or 99%? How many of those little fires have you had to put out?
We've had a lot of support from parents. I think they realize that each event that they get to go to, there has been some area schools that haven't allowed fans to come in there. So I think it's been a little bit of a wake up call for people to realize, okay, if I can go to this, then I'm going to act right once I get there. And so we really haven't had any issues. Like you said, fire. We hosted the state cheer competition a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
We ran probably 5,000 people throughout our building, clearing it out every hour of 700 people in, 700 people out. And, throughout that whole day, there were maybe 2 people that just absolutely refused to follow the protocols that we had in place. And I just think that people are so relieved to get to be here. They may not like it, they may not agree with it. But when the option is to either see your kid compete or not, they're choosing to do the right thing to come in and get to see their kid compete.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people are just so thankful that something's going on, and they'll do just about anything to make sure it continues. And that was kind of our secondary subtle message, and sometimes not so subtle. Hey, don't screw it up for somebody else. Okay, don't screw it up for your kid too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Emily, another question that we've been asking our athletic directors since we started these revolves around the topic of social awareness, social justice, if you will. And my question has been this, what are some things that we can do as athletic administrators? What are some things that we can do better for our kids, for our families, for our communities in this area of social awareness?
I think that the number one thing we need to do is be good listeners. We have avenues for our athletic teams. We have a group of leadership kids, 25 student athletes that are not captains of their teams, but they've chosen to apply for a council and be selected and be leaders, what I would deem leaders, because they stepped out there and did that. So we have our athletic leadership council that we can have those conversations with. But I think it's less talking and more listening to what individuals are going through, what they're feeling, ways that we, like you said, ways that we can make it better, or changes that need to be made. And so I think that that's the number one thing that as athletic or as any leader that we need to be doing right now is probably less talking and a lot more listening. And since we have such a great group of young people, which is the future of this, the influencers of this, just listening to them, listening to their concerns, their questions, their ideas. I think that's just going to help propel us into, what the future looks like. And man, they're resilient and they're smart and they've got great ideas. And so that's what we've tried to do here.
It's great to hear that you involving the students because again, we're talking about student athletics. Do you have any specific, programs or events or things that your student leadership team does that you could share?
This year has been so weird with us in person and out of person. With that council that we use, and again, those are the leaders. That's the way I access the student athletes the most, is through their leadership teams. And so a lot of times we have 120 coaches on staff. And so I work with those directly and then hope that they pass the messages on or the ideas on. But again, my direct contact with our student athletes are through that group of young people. And so we meet once a month. We have different topics each time that we meet. We have different speakers that come in each time. But again, it's to get them talking. And we did a little bit of mental awareness last month. We actually had to do it via Zoom, which has become sometimes the norm. If we're not in school, that's our choice, is the Zoom. So we were able to just kind of give them a mental break. We have social emotional department here at Union that kind of walked them through some, I guess, the mental aspect of the sports world, the what we're going through in the world, just to kind of get them to take a step back and be mindful of what's going on. And just some breathing exercises, some clearing your head exercises and stuff like that. And so that, again, this year has been weird. A lot of the things we normally would do, that we want to do, bring people together, we haven't been able to do quite as much, but we've been able to take that opportunity once a month to kind of work through our leaders.
Oh, yeah, that's, you're so true that, this year is, learn as you go. And it's great you have those programs. But I also want to go back to a word that you used, kids are resilient. Okay. They have a way of coming out on top. Let's lighten things up a little bit. I also ask our athletic directors, what's your favorite part of the job? What gets you excited about coming to school every day at Union?
Yeah. So I just love watching kids compete. I love watching kids win, but I also like to see how they respond when they lose. And I know that sounds strange, but the just seeing how kids deal with adversity either way. And again, when they're faced with, those different challenges, how they respond, those teams, that maybe should have finished 12th, but they finished 7th. And not just the ones who end up hoisting the trophy at the end, but just to see what goals they've set for themselves and seeing them accomplish or exceed those goals. And so, I get excited about that. I've been doing this 17 years. And as you know, it's not a 40-hour-a-week job. It's, you take the phone calls at night. We've got for the next 3 weeks, every weekend is booked up with stuff. But I think when you get to watch, adults in those coaching roles and doing what they love, being married to a coach, obviously, I have a different perspective of that, knowing what goes into what they did to get that team there. So I just have a greater appreciation for it. But getting to see those kids compete and hoping that their experience at Union is what my experience was. And that's what drives me every day here. Is I always tell them, I just hope that they felt the way about our high school when they leave the way I did. And a lot of them come back and want to be coaches here. A lot of them come back and want to see their old coaches. And I always tell our coaches, that's the mark of that you ran a great program, when they want to come back and see you, or, if education was their passion and they want to be a teacher or coach, that they want to come back here and do that.
Oh, I agree 100%. When those alums come back, just to visit, that's a huge victory. When they come back and want to coach and become a part of the program again, that's when you're doing something right. Okay.
Right.
Well, Emily, this has been great. Spending some time with you, but we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. We've already established that you are a master athletic administrator. And right now I'm going to challenge you to send out that brand new AD, maybe that intern like you were a few years ago, on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Emily Barkley's athletic director toolbox?
Okay. Number 1, I think you need to build relationships with people. I think you do that by, which kind of brings up my second, by being visible. You build that trust with the parents when you're there supporting their kid. You build that trust, that relationship with your coaches when you're there. And you can do that obviously with the student athletes. I remember as a young 8th grader playing basketball, and our athletic director was sitting there watching me play. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's coming to a girls basketball game, for a 14-year-old 8th grade. And just, I felt that support at that time. And I think that's really what drew me into it. So, the first 2 things, building those relationships and being visible, which I think go hand in hand. But the final thing I would say is you've got to find a balance with your personal life. I touched on it a little bit, but you have to be able to, take a moment for yourself from time to time, because this job can be all consuming. You can take a lot of phone calls at night, and you can take those on the weekend. But if you want to do this for a long time, you've got to find a way to balance that, and take a little bit of time for yourself, wherever that might be, to allow that to allow your energy level to stay at what it is. And I am very, very fortunate to have a close-knit family that helps me raise my daughter when my husband's out on the road and I'm doing things. And so I think those three are paramount to being a successful athletic director.
Oh, great advice. The idea of being present there. I've been the athletic director in the last 20 years here in Florida. I was the AD at 3 different schools, and at 2 of those schools, I would show up at a tennis match or a swim meet, and the parents and the kids would say, "Geez, we've never had an athletic director,
Right.
come to our events." And so, where else would I be? We've got a
Yeah.
home event, and the thing about balance, I'm a few years further into my career than you, but I can certainly echo that. And my wife's career teacher, career coach, and she certainly understands and appreciates the life of an AD. Doesn't always like it, but understands it. And again, our 3 kids are all grown. Fortunately, they all did sports because they wanted to. But I think looking back, I probably had my AD hat on, too much, and not my dad hat. So again, free advice for anyone listening. But Emily, thank you so much for braving the elements and spending some time with us today. Really enjoyed visiting with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
To our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of these podcasts are being uploaded to the FIAAA Educational Athletic Director YouTube channel. And until next time, thanks for listening. Come back again for another episode of the Educational AD.